So I'm welcome to Talking with Famous People, and tonight we have a very special episode of Talking with Famous People called "What Does Lorenz Walker Want Out of Life?" Is it cheese? Is it happiness? Or is it both? Tell us, Lorenz.
Okay. Well, I like cheese, and I think everyone is kind of forced to like happiness.
Yes, I'm
It's pretty
for.
sad.
Lorenz, you like happiness more right now! Right now, young man! You start liking happiness!
Well, what do I want out of life?
Yeah, what
I
do
mean,
you
I,
want?
I know that I have an idea of what I would like. I don't have the motivation to back any of that up, or yeah. But
Is what you want to do certain things, or is it to achieve certain outcome for some other reason? Like, do you want to engage in processes, or do you want to achieve outcomes?
I would say achieve outcomes.
Okay.
Well, because what I want to do, I don't. I mean, hmm. I mean, if I'm going to try at anything, I'm gonna want to succeed. And I've since I was young, I knew if I know if I applied myself that I could make a great thing happen or do something great. But it was really whether or not I wanted to, uh, if I wanted to really, or if I had the motivation to do it. And I still think that's the case. And I would want to help some way in maybe the educational field or just the development of a person, because I think when it comes down to it, our most valuable resource on this planet is a person and a person's brain. So if we can increase how we develop and shape these people, I think that would be for the benefit of humanity and our Earth.
So how do you want to shape them? You want to make them triangles, squares?
mm, how do I want to shape people?
I mean, how would you like to
well,
see?
to be
How would you like to see people be different? Let's phrase it that way.
I'd want to have them armed with critical thought, um, general knowledge of things. Mm, I don't know.
I mean, the INTP issue is, of course, SE in the seventh slot. And
Yeah.
when we talk about expert sensing, we're talking about proceeding along a given path without considering the fitness of the path anymore. And that's the thing that gives the INTP particular trouble is the dominant function is thinking. Their nature is to consider the fitness of the path. And that runs counter to proceeding along the path without considering
hmm
it, you know? And so I'm curious about this in particular at the moment because I'm somebody who is trying to come to terms a bit better with his seventh function. Like yours is SE, mine's FI. For me, that kind of turns out to be uh, little bouts of crying and stuff. So
hmm
I wonder if somehow, and like being okay with that, being okay with the discomfort of it, being okay with the discomfort of my feelings a little bit more, and instead of trying to oh no, which is how I feel, sort of instinctually when the feelings start to come around, or completely unaware of them, like behaving as though I had feelings, but consciously, as far as I'm concerned, these are perfectly reasonable reasons why I'm choosing to do this thing. But it's actually, well, you had your feelings hurt or something, Eric. So I'm curious as to what are your thoughts about is it possible to metacognate out solutions that enable you to break down your seventh function barriers, or is it possible in general for one to do so? I think it's easy for you to come up with ideas about stuff that's not about you. So, I mean, I think it's easier for you guys, for INTPs to talk about people in general as general principles and sort of divorce it from themselves a bit. What do you think?
What was the question?
Yeah,
Can you
I ask one question and then ask the second question and replace the first question stupidly. So the first question was a more important one, which was, do you think it's possible, and if so, how one would, if you were to give me advice, and I say, okay, well, how can I use metacognition to better understand my seventh function, FI, or better prevent it from causing me harms, or to better enable it to cause me benefits, or whatever it is supposed to do, or however I can optimize that fundamentally flawed element of mine? What would your advice be?
Well, that's the thing. I don't know. I haven't really tackled my seventh function either. Should be my SE.
See, okay, I'll give you the I'll give you one answer right away. Stop thinking you have to know to give an answer. Who cares? What do you mean? Here I'm asking you to come. I know you don't know anything about this, but we're both on an island, and
Yeah.
I not only don't know anything about it, but I have NE in my seventh slot, and I can't think of any possibilities. Could you help me just at least come up with some possibilities of ways one might metacognate about this?
Okay, metacognating about your 7 slot FI.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Um,
I understand that contradicts one of the previous premises, but yeah.
um, maybe just trying to, I don't know, maybe rationalizing your just having emotions and how that they could skew your perception in any given moment. So to account for that,
So think about the fact that I have emotions and that they impact me.
yeah.
How do I know they're emotions? How do I know which ones they are? How do I know they're not thoughts? Do I have to
Well,
actually feel the emotions or just think about them?
that's the thing. I'm not. It's not like I have these high in my stack either.
All right.
It's my eighth function. Like, How does an eighth function play, or come into play?
I mean, I think it's easy for you to do, but you don't understand exactly how what's happening. Like for me, I take a lot of actions, right, on SE. But I was thinking about this earlier, and I wonder if this is true for everybody in general, or if this is something to do with where SE is. It's impossible for me to say why it is at one moment I transition from putting off doing something to actually doing something. What causes that moment of action to happen? Now, what exactly caused the moment of action this evening when I was sitting here in my chair considering back and forth between going to bed and putting up a go to meeting? And I decided to do the go to meeting. What exactly determined that? I don't know.
Mm,
What does it entail to take action, SE? I don't really know, but I know I see it happens, Obviously it happens. I don't remember ever doing it exactly, It was just sort of something that started happening. Oh, now I'm doing this thing, I see. When did I
so
start doing
something
it?
like it took over, right?
Well, I'm like, well,
Kind of.
when did I start? This happens all the time. Like, what am I doing again? That's kind of an SI
Yeah.
thing. But then the thing is, there'll also be when did I start doing this? Wasn't I doing something else before? And the answer will be, yeah, you were supposed to be organizing that. But then you came over here and you thought, oh, that thing needs to be put over there. And then you started doing this instead.
Yeah.
That'll happen to me a lot. So I think that the SE part combines with the bad SI to just sort of make life for an ENTP feel as though it's just a bunch of random events that just sort of happen. Like, I
Wait,
don't.
where's SE in your stack?
Eight, eight. With SE8, so my action is unconscious but loose, right? Unlike your action is tight. My feelings are tight as well. Uh, they don't. They've been restrained too hard, too long. They're not healthy. Nothing healthy grows like that. Same thing, with everybody's seventh slot. Because if you think about it, it's your third slot is your role function. That's the one you're working hard on and mastering, right? And the other half is supposed to take care of itself in each of these things. In your dominant function, you go, look, for you, for example, you go, those people understanding truth through external consistencies that are communicable clearly is irrelevant. I'm not worried about that. They can worry about their own understandings. I need to worry only about my own understanding. But since that's your dominant function, you understand the whole idea of understanding well. So you understand TE really well, even though it's your fifth function. And in fact, you end up relying on it, even though it's unconscious, as just as heavily as your second function ultimately, as you get older. But the eighth function, on the other hand, is not your friend in the same way the fifth function is. The eighth function is the one that is probably too loose. It was a little too loose. It'll fly around a bit, So, and you're not even aware of there being something there to be flying around. You're like, well, what do you mean? I have an action taking problem. I don't understand. What do you mean by taking action exactly? You mean those things that are always just happening?
So how would the eighth slot FI work out?
Well, it would seem to me that you're probably engaged in a lot of feeling-driven behaviors. I think that's why you tend to isolate a lot. I think that INTPs they feel very vulnerable when they open up, and they're concerned about possible impacts specifically to their feelings. They know their feelings are loose in that way. Mine have loosened up a lot, but they're still. It's like it's kind of a really oafishly clumsy kind of just fucking stay down there, kind of smash it all down with a broken chair kind of a effect on my FI. I think probably on your SC as well. So, but for you in the eighth slot, it's going to be more like, I remember to screw that down, but you only really got like the screw is part way down all the way, and it's kind of rattled all the time, So that would be basically, it would be what you defend against with your TI, what you utilize with your TI as well. So you structure your relationships to make sure that your FI rattles as little as possible. You want your cool, even keel relationships in general. You get attached to notions of clarity in conscious understanding of systems and functions, and you want to be able to anticipate things accordingly. But my take on INTP thinking is that the problem that they have is they are utilizing the mechanisms of NE to do their work, which means they're stomping on shit and seeing if it withstand scrutiny and trying to break it apart as best as possible. And they learn relativism because they discover they're able to break apart just about anything with their TI. And especially with the NE combo. TI NE's, it's the fucking wrecking ball, So ultimately that makes it difficult for them to accept the exclusion of the potentialities that is necessitated by taking a firm position and adhering to it or advocating it as position statements. So that's my take on that. I don't remember what the question was. That's an answer to something.
It's undecisiveness and openness.
Oh, right. Well,
Relativism.
Yeah, I mean the FI and the eighth, I think, does that tie in with the relativism, or does it tie in with the decisiveness, or does it tie in with the taking action? Yeah, probably. I mean, the whole point being, the TI is designed to be used to analyze things, right? If you're engaged in an analysis, then you're engaged in the deliberative process. INTP is by nature a deliberative beast. They're engaged in the deliberative process. The the finalization of a decision is an entirely different matter, and that's not really their. They because they value above all else deliberation. They're going to have trouble with the action part because they are counterweighted. You know, I mean they're inversely proportional.
Yeah, it's quite funny, I find.
Do you find it frustrating?
Mm, no, I wouldn't say so. I mean, I could see it, how it might be frustrating, but I don't feel it. I don't feel it frustrating.
Well, you're still quite young, right?
Yeah, I'm 19.
I mean, here's the thing. As somebody who wasted a lot of good years of his life um, for you know for reasons of nature and whatever else, I can tell you that you have a lot of time and not very much time concurrently. There's no reason to assume that you have to get on something now and hammer it now in order for it to be successful long term. At the same time,
Mm,
the amount of time you have left is a resource that can be exploited in many different ways. And you are necessarily going to exploit it in one. The deferral of decision making is a decision to defer. And ultimately, the reason you're able to do that is because you fail to keep in mind adequately that the clock is ticking. And if you were to if it were a resource distribution style strategy video game, you would
mhm.
totally account for that factor.
Yeah, the kind of video games I like, time management.
Right. You totally account for that factor, no problem, right? But
Yeah,
in your own life, it's difficult because it's such a distant thing you're talking about, and we don't really
and you have
operate
to
on that
take
kind of
into
scope.
effect experience. Like in a time management game, you could just execute this and that, and you don't have to account for your own experience getting in the way of any kind of objectives.
Well, the function of proceeding is streamlined for you, and often it's automated. So if you want that peasant to go chop those trees and collect them so you can build your fort or whatever, you
Yeah.
don't have to walk him back and forth over there every single time. You
Hmm.
just assign him that task and he just does it, you know?
Hmm.
Um, we really need to have real life be more like that. And I think the answer is the INTP needs to be farsighted enough to try to make a bunch of money so they can hire helpers.
Yeah, I could see that.
Helpers, INTP would like having helpers, I think, in general. Although the INTP would not probably enjoy having to give direction to the helpers. And I'm not sure. Yeah, INTP ENTJ partnership would be perfect for uh, a combination of NTP insight and NTJ handle.
Hmm.
But at some point, I mean, I don't know. It really depends on how much it bothers you. You know, it's like to the extent that you can exist in a life that's satisfying by affording you interests and uh, I mean, it's a tough question to answer. You know, it depends so much on your own values, what you prioritize. Those are the sort of things that get the INTP stuck, huh?
What was it?
Exactly that sort of back and forth is the sort of thing that gets the INTP stuck, probably.
The back and forth of what?
I'm
Exactly.
saying, well, on the one hand, it is important to put a handle on shit. On the other hand, it's not necessarily important, and how much of that is a value that's imposed
Oh, yeah.
externally, all that kind of
Especially
stuff.
when that's met with like indifference and apathy.
So, who provides the indifference and the apathy?
I do.
Oh, I say you. I see. You're saying your own indifference and apathy.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think there's a difference between indifferent and unaware of unaware of what the experience of the alternative feels like. Because I think that's the difficulty that everybody has at your age in general
Yeah, I think
is
my father's told me this actually. It's like you don't know that you don't want it because you haven't had it.
right. Eh,
But then
yeah.
I feel like to an extent you could predict something or a lot of things and how they go out.
Well,
Then again, you can't.
what I mean is we tend to reject the viability of options we don't perceive as being within our reach. And because that's the case, we tend to reach less highly because we ascribe to values that may or may not actually conform to our own actual values that may be sort of identity defense mechanisms. If we were in a culture of turtles that valued having the hardest shell on your back and that afforded a lot of status or something, and you had a not such a hard shell, you'd probably end up arguing against the distinction between hard and soft shelled turtles and stuff like that. You know,
Yeah.
that's kind of the nature of every sentient, uh, old enough to be sentient human being is that they want to be okay, and everybody in the world wants to be okay, and everybody feels as though there's a set of definitions about what okay is, um, that's been established for them from their childhood on. And the process that we have to come to terms with is how many of those standards do we want to adopt as representations of our own identity? Which ones do we want to eliminate and say these were lies that were forced upon us? Which ones do we want to?
To the reprogramming.
Well, I mean, it's you have to make a decision about either one at a time, or you can use sort of a mechanism elimination system or something like that. I mean, you have to go through it, and you got to make decisions. Some of the things my parents and my teachers and stuff told me were spot on the money. Some of them were completely 180 degrees wrong, and it's just a matter of adjudicating those issues one at a time. But that's the issue that we have, is that we know, if there's one thing that's clear, we know when we emerge from adolescence into young adulthood, it's that there's a right way and a wrong way to be. We know it through one of multiple lenses. Um, I knew when I emerged from adolescence into young adulthood that on the reproductive viability scale, I was wrong. That I wasn't okay enough to participate in this sort of, like, again, late 80s white rich suburb dating culture that was going on in my high school. That I was explicitly excluded from such things because I wasn't one of the right kind of people or something. So those sort of things were narratives that I had to wrestle with. We're all subject to some amount of ontological violence in our youth, and
Correct
we've
it.
yeah, I mean we've gotta well we have to come to a determination about it. That's the thing. And often we'll come to some sort of hybrid thing. Like, my dad was all about making sure to get shit done properly. Don't half-ass things. Uh, be on top of your shit. Handle your shit. And I'm just kind of a sloppy human being in some ways.
Hmm.
And for a long time, I felt like, well, Eric, you just you're just being a baby. You're just undisciplined, and you should just be ashamed of yourself for failing to fulfill these basic things or not being more like your parents want you to be in general. It has more of an impact on you than you think, especially if you have loving parents and stuff. Certainly, my parents were. They imparted into me a lot of values I couldn't live up to. It and you know, I mean, ultimately, I aspire to live up to most of those values at the end of the day. I want to be perceived as hardworking. I want to be perceived as fulfilling my duties that I have in my various capacities, professional, parental. It causes me discomfort when I think people perceive me as unprofessional, even though I can be kind of unprofessional. Um, you know, all those things are relationships I have with my own identity from back then. I've got memories, I've got stories, I've got experiences, I've got meta narratives involving some of those childhood memories that say, okay, well, that one, I reacted to it like that in this later situation, and that's reflective of how blah 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 blah. I've got shit like that going on. That composition of an identity that inevitably happens for everybody. Um, as you move away from the values, you understand that it's not just a matter of choosing which values and or uh, sort of deprogramming yourself or something like that. It's understanding how that value imprinting is not something that was put inside of you. It's part of who you are, and it's not to be simply rejected. It's to be processed, and it's to be ideally incorporated peacefully into a model that respects from whence one has emerged, because that is the same as who one is.
Hmm.
Do you have any thoughts on that, Lorenz? Or
No, not specifically.
okay, it's an interesting question. I don't know. I'm not sure. I think that there's definitely solution paths available for INTPs to get more shit done, but I would point to the obvious one being medication, and then the second obvious one being simply that I guess it's not really a path, but that it starts with at least some sort of metacognition, which you're already engaged in. So, I mean, that's a good sign.
Yeah, it's like I'm aware of the situation. I don't know how to change it.
Well, I mean, I don't think it would work quite like this way for trying to get you to do something as opposed to not do something. But for me, I would I built a TI wall, quote unquote, around uh, possibility of drinking alcohol to prevent myself from drinking alcohol, and it involved me blocking off every possible excuse route that I might take to avoid actually doing the thing. I mean, to avoid actually doing the thing. The problem is, I'm not sure if that's going to work when you're being asked to take action rather than to not take action.
Hmm.
You'd have to build a wall around inaction. You probably spend a long time building. You probably spend a long time passively building the inaction wall, the wall around inaction. Yeah. Well, anyway, you guys are a bit of a mystery, of course, too, because it's not like you really want to open up and say and just spill your guts about how you're feeling and stuff like that, or what you're thinking, because
Well, that's the thing personally with me. I think I'm pretty transparent. It's just I'm not going to openly throw it out there unless it's asked for.
mm,
And that when it comes to feelings, like for the most part, I don't know or I don't feel. I don't know what it is.
um, yeah, NTP conundrum. I was very much a huge procrastinator before. I think the important thing is doing stuff you find satisfying in an environment that provides some kind of external discipline to get you to do it. Maybe is another thing. Sometimes,
Well, yeah, that's the thing. Once I'm in like in a routine or I'm going with the flow of something, like I have something that just it's in front of me and like I'm supposed to do it, whatever. Like school, for example, just getting into routine to doing all that shit. But now that I'm not in it, it's just I haven't self-started an effort to designate path.
right? Well, if you were an ENTP, I would suggest that you need to do it publicly. That will motivate you to do things. I was thinking about checking my YouTube messages. Maybe we could do that video next. I I'm afraid to check them now because I forgot about them for a long time. I didn't realize that I was getting them. I thought that the bell would announce it, but they don't. It doesn't announce it. And so I've got all these old YouTube messages, and I realized shit. A lot of people have messaged me, and they all think I've ignored them. My FE is
Oh.
like going nuts, right? And so I'm scared to go to my YouTube messages. I haven't looked at them. When I read one, responded to it, and ran away from my YouTube messages, and haven't been back since. Is that crazy? It's kind of crazy, right?
But you've read one and haven't been back since.
Well, that I have phobia of mailboxes and stuff. Like
Uh,
I'm afraid of my email box. I'm afraid of the messages because all it ever seems to do is confer responsibilities and or I made a mistake. I'm scared of like somebody's gonna be mad. I have to go do a bunch of FE dances because people think I've been ignoring them. Or what if there's something
uh,
really important and I was ignoring it, and then I feel bad because I didn't do anything and now it's too late. Or I mean, all that shit happens.
yeah, I don't know. I don't really have any of those responsibilities plus my FEs in the fourth slot, so
Yeah,
it's
that's
just
true.
whatever.
That's true. Well, um, yeah. Okay, well, thank you for watching Second Fence People. I've been host Eric, and while you're sleeping tonight and you're dreaming, I want you to think about eating plenty of cheese.